The story I'm about to tell you will haunt you. It will linger in the back of your mind long after you've finished this video. An unsettling feeling will creep through your thoughts, leaving you with a sense of unease that you can't quite shake. You may feel sadness, even nauseous, as the details unfold. And when you reach the end, you'll be left with more questions than answers, questions that to this day remain unanswered. On a cold winter's morning in China, January 19, 1996, the city lay still beneath a thick blanket of snow. The streets were eerily quiet except for the brave souls who ventured out to work. Most people stayed home, seeking warmth as the snow fell from the sky. The sanitation workers, however, were asked to report to work once the storm had cleared. Among them was Jan, a poor street cleaner who, despite the bitter cold, had no choice but to show up for her shift. With a family to feed and little else to fall back on, she bundled up and trudged through the snow to collect garbage. As she was cleaning, something unusual caught her eye. Beneath the fresh layer of snow, partially buried, lay a small parcel. Intrigued, Jan carefully picked it up, brushing off the snow. It was a box, oddly unscathed. Curiosity overcame her, and she opened it. Inside, to her surprise, were freshly boiled, neatly wrapped pieces of meat, the aroma rising from the box like a tempting invitation. And strangely, the meat didn't appear to be spoiled. Perhaps the freezing temperature had preserved it. Jan's stomach growled as she wondered about the strange discovery. Could it be someone had dropped it by accident, or had it been meant for something else? She hesitated for only a moment before deciding to take the box home. After all, the meat could feed her family, and they hadn't had a proper meal in days. At home, Jan set to work preparing the pre-boiled meats in her dimly lit kitchen. As she washed the meats in the pot, she noticed something odd. At the bottom, pieces that didn't look quite like the others. Leaning in for a closer inspection, her heart froze in her chest. 3 human fingers, severed and soaked in meat broth, were lying at the bottom of the pot. Jan's knees buckled, the warmth of the kitchen turned suffocating, the once delicious scent now a sickening stench. Horror clawed its way up her throat. She had been about to feed her family. But the question that chilled her more than the winter's air was, what kind of meat was this, and who had left the box? Jan's heart pounded as she dialed the police, but when she spoke, their response chilled her to the bone. They had already known. The strange packages had been discovered scattered across various spots on the Nanjing University campus, and they were just as perplexed as she was. No one could explain what the packages contained or who was behind the disturbing deliveries. Each moment that passed only thickened the air with a sense of dread. Days later, when the truth finally began to surface, it was far darker and far more horrifying than anyone could have ever imagined. The discovery began with a whisper, a rumor that spread like wildfire across the university campus. 4 packages, identical and unmarked, had been found at various locations, each containing 500 neatly cut and boiled pieces of meat. The total count? Over 2,000 pieces. Police arrived, swiftly shutting down the university and launching a campus-wide search. No one was allowed to leave. Students huddled together in their dorms, whispering theories, their unease growing by the hour. And they too wondered who had left the packages, and more importantly, what kind of meat was it? Then, near the main gates, officers stumbled upon something even stranger. A bedsheet tightly wrapped around a round, heavy object lay abandoned on the frozen ground. The fabric was damp, stained with something dark that had begun to seep through. The officers hesitated before carefully peeling it back. There, laying in front of them, a severed head that too had been boiled. What they found made the air turn thick with dread. Not far from the gates, near the murky water of a nearby canal, another discovery awaited, a white sheet eerily laying in the snow. As officers approached, the wind shifted, carrying with it a faint, sickly scent. There, wrapped in the sheets, a torso, but the horror did not end there. Beside the gruesome bundle, a set of clothes neatly arranged, a red coat perfectly intact, but something was missing. The undergarments. The strangest part, the outfit showed no signs of struggle, no rips, no blood, no indication of force. It was as if someone had removed them with care and simply vanished. Or was it something worse than that? Was this a warning? A message? As if someone wanted to make sure that the neatly preserved clothes were found. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken dread. The careful placement, the absence of struggle. It was not the work of a careless hand. Someone had left this here, deliberately. Once the police put the pieces together, the horrifying truth sunk in. The meat were human remains. The sheer volume of pieces had made identification nearly impossible. Over 2,000 pieces carefully boiled and neatly packaged, stripped of any recognizable features. Even the head had been boiled post-mortem, and eerily it had been frozen at some point too. Police had tried to extract blood samples from the remains, but the effort was fruitless. The body parts had been meticulously boiled, every last drop of blood drained from them. What remained was eerily clean, stripped of any traceable identity, and with China not using DNA tracing at the time, there was no way to confirm beyond doubt. So, who was this person? It wasn't until investigators displayed a photograph of the clothes they had found that the first real breakthrough came. The red jacket. A group of students recognized it immediately. It didn't belong to the victim, but to her sister. Could it be? Had the remains belonged to someone they knew? Diao Aiqing. Diao was a shadow among the living, present but unseen. A bright young woman, highly intelligent yet isolated. She walked the halls of Nanjing University without leaving a trace. She had been in Nanjing for 3 short months when she vanished without a trace. Last seen leaving campus on January 9th, 1996. Her departure went largely unnoticed. No one noticed she was gone, no one questioned why. Born on March 11, 1976 in Shengao, China's Jiangsu province, Diao had known hardship from the start. Raised in a poverty-stricken home, she was determined to forge her own path. While her younger sister had sacrificed her education to help support the family, Diao pursued a degree in computer applications at the Department of Information Management in Nanjing, China, earning a reputation for brilliance even as she remained isolated from her peers. Her family, though loving, kept their distance, believing she needed space to succeed. Calls from home were rare. News never reached her. Diao was left adrift, unaware of life-altering events, a sister's quiet marriage, a grandfather's final farewell. No one noticed when Diao stopped attending classes. No one wondered why her dorm room remained undisturbed, her books left exactly as they had been. The administration dismissed her absence as a personal matter. Students came and went all the time. Perhaps she had dropped out, transferred, or simply decided to disappear. There was no inquiry, no phone call to her family. Diao was like a ghost slipping through the cracks. Until now. Had someone been watching her all along? Diao's parents arrived in Nanjing under a heavy veil of sorrow, their expressions hollow, their eyes searching desperately for answers they weren't sure they wanted to find. The police led them through the sterile halls of the morgue, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic and something colder, something final. On the metal table before them lay what little remained. There was no intact body, no peaceful face to mourn, only fragments carefully preserved, pieced together in a grotesque puzzle. Her mother clutched her husband's arm as the coroner uncovered Diao's head. They searched desperately for something, anything, that could prove it was her, and then beneath the cold fluorescent lights of the morgue, they found it. A single mole on the right side of Diao's cheek, small, round, and dark, and described as the size of a mung bean. They didn't need DNA tests. They didn't need further proof. The meat in those packages had in fact been their daughter. And someone who had watched her, followed her, waited for the perfect moment, had done this to her, But why, and where was the rest of her? What haunted investigators were the absence of Dao's liver and several other major organs. Despite their exhaustive search, those parts of her were never located. A grim thought came to mind. Had someone unknowingly taken them home, mistaking them for ordinary meat? But there was something even more disturbing. The precision of the cuts were unnatural, too meticulous to be the work of an amateur. Whoever had dismembered Dao had done so with practiced skill. The careful, clean cuts all pointed to someone trained in handling flesh. A surgeon, or a butcher. Further analysis of her remains revealed something even more sinister. The marks on her bones indicated that 2 different knives had been used, each wielded with clinical efficiency. This wasn't a frenzied attack, it was methodical, deliberate. Someone had taken their time. Then came the most horrifying revelation of all. Her head and internal organs hadn't just been boiled, they had been boiled for several days. The thought sickened investigators. Who would do such a thing? Somewhere in Nanjing, the person responsible was still out there. Let's go back to the last day Dao was last seen, January 10th, 1996, a night that should have been like any other. Dao had always been a quiet, disciplined student, an intelligent young woman who kept to herself, earning the respect of her professors but never quite fitting in with her peers. But that evening, something shifted. It started with a mistake, a simple rule broken, an electrical appliance used in the dorm room, a violation that brought swift punishment, not just for Dao but for every girl on her floor. The anger was immediate. The other students turned on her, their resentment boiling over in hushed whispers and sharp words. A confrontation erupted, heated, cruel. Dao, normally composed, found herself at the center of their fury. She had embarrassed them, dragged them down with her mistake. The argument ended, but the humiliation lingered. Dao returned to her room. Then she fixed her bed, straightening the sheets, smoothing out the fabric as if trying to restore control over something unraveling inside her. Then she reached for her red coat, her sister's coat. At 6 p.m. she stepped out into the cold night. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She didn't say goodbye. That was the last time anyone saw Dao alive. The police turned their gaze inward. What if the killer wasn't just one person? What if the students, humiliated and furious, had turned on her together? What if the teachers had looked the other way, or worse, participated? The investigation stretched beyond the city. Police traveled to Dao's hometown, desperate for some overlooked clue, some hidden grudge that might explain why she had been targeted. They took blood samples from every single person in the village, looking for a connection, a motive, an answer. Nothing. Desperate for answers, investigators turned their focus to commercial kitchens in the area. The way Dao's body had been butchered suggested someone with knowledge of handling meat. If her blood had spilled anywhere, if even the faintest trace had seeped into the cracks of a butcher's table or the drain of a restaurant kitchen, they would find it. But there was nothing. No trace of blood, no evidence, no leads. It was as if Dao had been swallowed by the dark, her body reduced to nameless, bloodless pieces, boiled, packaged, discarded. Someone had erased her. It was a crime so gruesome, so methodically executed that even decades later no one can explain who did it or why. Some suspected the poor elderly woman who unknowingly took Dao's remains home, mistaking them for discarded meat. But it wasn't unheard of for the impoverished to scavenge food thrown out by students on campus. And while it was strange, in her desperation, she would have no reason to believe the neatly wrapped packages contained human flesh. No one could have imagined what they truly were. Police scoured Dao's dorm hoping for answers. They found nothing but a diary. Its pages held no secrets, no warnings, no signs that she had feared for her life. There was no evidence proving that January 9th was the last day she was alive. The only certainty was this: On the morning of January 19th, someone left 4 packages of her dismembered body across campus. It had snowed heavily that morning. The remains were found with snow both on top and beneath of them, meaning they had been placed there while it was still snowing. The killer had moved in the dead of the night, unseen, unnoticed. Had maybe Diao gone out that night to clear her anxious thoughts? Or was she simply hungry? She had just lost access to her electric appliance, her only means of cooking, and 6 p.m., the time she left her dorm, was dinner time. Did she walk into a restaurant looking for something warm to eat and never walk out? Was she lured somewhere under false kindness, a stranger offering food, warmth, and sympathy on that cold January night? Or had she fallen into the hands of something much, much worse, a cannibal butcher? It would explain why so much of her was missing, why her major organs were never found, why the intestines were carefully removed, as if to avoid contamination like you would with animals. Perhaps they had planned to dispose of every trace to erase Diao completely. They packaged the remains, leaving nothing recognizable, knowing the poor scavenged for discarded food. The meat would be taken, cooked, eaten, and Diao would simply vanish without a trace. But then, a mistake, a careless oversight, a hand, a few fingers, a sliver of something unmistakably human. Wouldn't they have known that someone would eventually connect the pieces, that the torso and the head would reveal the truth? Or had they already planned for that too? Maybe they wanted her to be found. For 3 months after Diao's disappearance, police relentlessly pursued leads, but the case only grew colder. Eventually, the search was abandoned. And then the theories began. One of the most chilling theories suggested that Diao's organs had been harvested, her body boiled to remove traces of antiseptic or anesthesia, erasing the evidence of a medical procedure. And then there was a disturbing coincidence. The very day Diao disappeared, Nanjing University performed a historic intestine transplant, a milestone in medical history. But where had the organ come from? The university remained eerily silent on the source of the intestine used in the procedure. Could it have been Diao? Had someone carefully chosen her, knowing she had no close friends, no family nearby, no one to raise alarms when she vanished? At the time, China had the second largest organ transplant program in the world. Organ transplantation in the country began in the 1960s, with the most organs sourced from executed prisoners. This practice wasn't officially discontinued until 2015. But could Diao have really been a victim of organ trafficking? The logistics of such crime seemed improbable. Would a rogue surgeon abduct her after 6 p.m., extract her organs and transplant them into a patient within mere hours, and then 9 days later dispose of her remains right on her own campus? It seemed reckless, almost taunting, and yet the precise surgical cuts and the missing major organs kept the theory alive. Whoever the killer was, they had gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal their crime. In 2016, on the 20th anniversary of Diao's murder, her sister traveled to Nanjing's public security department, pleading for answers. Authorities insisted the case was still open. They would never give up. But justice never came. In 2021, her family filed a lawsuit against Nanjing University, demanding 1.6 million yuan in damages. But it wasn't about money. It was about accountability. Diao's sister stated that the lawsuit was about seeking justice, not financial compensation. Some believe the method of Diao's killing echoes an ancient Chinese execution practice, lingqi, or death by 1,000 cuts, used as a form of torture for centuries. This brutal punishment was designed to inflict pain and ensure suffering continued even in the afterlife. Who would want to inflict such horror on Diao Aiqing? She had been new to the city, barely 4 months into her studies. Could she have unknowingly angered the wrong person? Was someone jealous of her intelligence, her ambition? Or was it something even simpler, something more personal? Diao had been punished for using an electrical appliance in her dorm. Because of her, other students on the floor had also received disciplinary actions. Could one of them have held a grudge so deep they planned the ultimate revenge? If so, it would have required time, effort, and a place to do it. Students weren't allowed to cook in their rooms, but maybe someone had access to a kitchen. Someone had the ability to boil her body for days. They were patient and completely without remorse. Perhaps that's the most terrifying part of it all. Maybe someone was as quiet as Diao, someone who understood her silence, had been watching, but unlike Diao, their mind was never quiet. There was something lurking in the depths of their thoughts. Things so dark, so unspeakable, that only they could commit a crime this monstrous. A crime that was revolting both physically and emotionally. They knew what they were doing, they took their time, and worst of all, they may still be out there waiting.